Damn, I can't believe it. Just like that, we are now on episode 8 of season 3. Holy shit, the season is almost over. And then after this recent episode, episode 8, I think we now have confirmation of time travel. Specifically astro projection time travel, maybe? I don't know what else you would call that. Let me know down in the comments below if there is a name for that or your interpretation of that. But as always, we will take a deep dive into that a bit later. But let's get into the normal recap first, and then we'll talk about a lot of those things later. So we're picking things up right after episode 7, where Fatima killed Tilly and Ellis walked in and found her red-handed. So Boyd takes Fatima out to the shed in the woods, which is the same shed that I think he took Sarah to after she was found back in the town, so he could question her and keep her out of harm's way. She told Boyd that some sort of rage took control of her, and that's what killed Tilly. She said that she could feel herself reaching for the garden tool, but how it wasn't really her. So once again, this baby, or whatever Fatima is turning into, is starting to take stronger control of her. And she's saying that this is what led to her killing Tilly. Now Boyd brings her some of that good rotten shit to eat, and of course she doesn't want to, but of course that's the only thing that she can keep down. She asks Boyd what's going to happen to Tilly because she just left her out there, and Boyd is like, we're just going to have to let somebody find her. That's how this is going to have to unfold, because we can't let Fatima own up to it, because if she does, then that means things are going to happen in a way that Boyd doesn't want it to happen. He doesn't want Fatima to get caught because he considers her to be family now. We're definitely playing some nepotism, some favoritism here for sure. We already knew that Boyd wasn't going to put Fatima in the box. We knew that she wasn't going to get that type of punishment because Boyd's going to cut some corners for the people he cares about the most. That's just the way it is, and I think everyone else in town would definitely treat this situation the same way. Then back in town, Jim, Jade, and Tabitha return back from the village. Jade heads back over to the bar, and this is where he runs into Henry, Victor's dad. And of course Henry just wants to hang out because he's looking for a drink. He's been through a lot of shit. He's in a town full of monsters. The man needs a drink. Then over at Colony House, the residents finally discover Tilly's body out in the greenhouse. During this time, Mario runs to assist, and Elgin is watching from the porch as his Polaroid camera goes off again. Now we don't get a clear visual of the photo in this moment, but of course we already know what it is, but we'll wait till later. Over at the hospital, Julie drops by to talk to Randall and to tell her how she thinks it's a good idea for them to go back to the ruins. And of course Randall's like, hell with all of that. That sounds like a terrible idea to me. But Julie is very curious to head back, and of course we'll find out why later. And honestly, I don't blame Randall for not wanting to go back. He doesn't have the same level of curiosity that Julie has about it because he doesn't give a shit. So I understand that. So then we cut back to Boyd and Ellis as they're heading back towards Colony House, and of course everyone has found out that Tilly was killed. And Boyd tells Ellis to go up to his room and pack some things for Fatima, and then he goes over and then he has to play like he doesn't know what the hell is going on. Donna shows up and tells Boyd that they need to check with Sarah, but Boyd is like it wasn't her, because of course he knows that it wasn't her. But Donna tells him, of course logically people need someone to blame. And why not blame Sarah, of course, because she is the only one in town that everybody seems to be on edge about. Even Victor has pointed it out himself that she is the scariest person in town. So if Boyd doesn't do something soon, Sarah could possibly be thrown in the box for something that she didn't do. Although technically she should have been thrown in the box at an earlier time for killing her brother and then trying to kill Ethan. But hey, that's a conversation for another time. Then speak of the devil, we cut over to Sarah's place with her and Victor as she's trying her damnedest to be a ventriloquist for Victor, but the shit ain't working. Victor's telling her that she's doing a horrible damn job and that Jasper doesn't sound like that.
Not like that. I told you it doesn't sound like that, sir.
And it was just so funny because Sarah's trying her best to get this right for Victor, and he's like, you're doing a terrible damn job. You're doing horrible. And of course she doesn't know what to do, and Victor's not really good at giving directions on what she needs to do. So yeah. Then over at the Matthews, Jim informs Tabitha that someone called who said his name was Thomas, their son Thomas. And of course she's shocked as shit about this, understandably, but before we can get any details on this, Sarah knocks on the door and tells Tabitha that Victor only wants to speak to her now. Then we cut over to the hospital where Randall runs into Elgin, who claims he's there to get a bandage for his foot since he cut it, but we already know he's lying because we find out later that he's stealing a blood IV, which apparently he's trying to draw some blood. And of course we can already guess that that is for Fatima. So then back over at Sarah's place down in the basement, after she goes and gets Tabitha, she still doesn't seem to be much help. Victor's still throwing a damn fit and they're not making much progress. But Victor does tell her how he needs Jasper to talk because he could tell them things that they need to know.
He needs to tell me. You need to make him tell me.
To tell you what, Victor?
The secrets that he told Christopher. You have to be the one.
Okay.
You have to be the one.
And if I'm being completely honest, it's just hard not to laugh in these moments where Victor's throwing a damn fit. The actor's doing a great job, but it's funny to watch. Sorry. Then we cut back over to the bar with Jade and Henry, as Jade is still trying to figure out the puzzle with the numbers and all of that good stuff, which I've already hinted at to you guys what that could be. I know there's a ton of leaks out there, guys, so I'm not really going to be getting into that. If you know what's going to happen, then you know. I'm still going to wait to talk about it later because I have to respect embargoes and stuff like that. I can give hints, of course, but I'm not going to be getting into any spoilers that you guys find on Reddit or on the internet floating around anywhere. Not going there. But anyway, Jim barges in, still trying to put on his little tough guy act, and he's talking about how he's upset that Jade dragged out Tabitha and Ethan to the village out in the woods, but it wasn't his decision. Tabitha's a grown-ass woman and she did it on her own. But for some reason, Jim never wants to speak to his wife. He always wants to blame other people for the things that Tabitha does. If Ethan's involved, then of course that makes a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more understandable when things like that was happening between Ethan and Victor was dragging Ethan out in the woods by himself. That was a little more understandable because Victor's a grown-ass man, Ethan's a kid, and Victor's like, hey, come out with me in the woods. That's more understandable, but Jim getting mad at Jade about something that Tabitha's doing, the guy needs to get his shit together. Jim is all upset that Jade is doing what he's doing, but Jade's like, it doesn't really matter because if what I'm doing ends up getting us home, who in the shit cares if I think I'm the smartest person in the room? I figured it out and I saved everyone, so who gives a shit? But ultimately, all of this just kind of makes you dislike Jim a little bit more. I've already seen it in the comments. Everybody's starting to hate Jim a lot more. But things like this, these type of situations where the guy just needs to speak to his wife, it's making us hate him a lot more. Then we jump back out to the shed in the woods with Fatima as Ellis pops up to check in on her and then bring her the stuff that he packed at Colony House. Then after he leaves for the first time, which I believe this is the first time, Fatima gets to see the creepy Komodo lady. And of course the lady just gives her a weird jump scare, but nothing really seems to happen. But I gotta ask you guys, is it just me or does it seem like the creepy Komodo lady seems to be coming to life a little bit more and more as we tend to see her pop up? This could just be an inconsistency thing with the CGI throughout the series because you gotta remember, this is still sort of a low budget series that we're watching, so it doesn't have the greatest of CGI. So maybe that could be the explanation for some of the inconsistencies we see with the character's face. But I don't know if that's a coming to life sort of thing or if that's just an inconsistency with CGI. But it seems like her face tends to change a little bit when she's in different shots. Let me know what you guys think about that down below. Then back at Colony House with Elgin, he seems to be drawing some blood and putting some blood in some jars, which I assume that is for Fatima because the next Polaroid that he gets in this scene is a photo of the shed that Fatima is in out in the woods. Now, although we didn't get to see a clear visual of the previous Polaroid, we can already assume that was the blood kit that he got from the hospital. And now the mission seems to be to take some blood out to Fatima out in the shed. Then back over at the bar with Henry and Jim, Henry seems to be trying to give Jim some advice on how to be a better husband. Since he didn't do too great with Miranda, he's trying to give Jim some tips on how to not fuck this up, although I think he's already done that. But once again, for me, this seems to play into the theory that Henry might be Jim or a version of him, because we already understand to some extent that Tabitha is a reborn version of Miranda, and Jim seems to be making the same mistakes with Tabitha that Henry made with Miranda. And it's almost like in this scene Henry is giving himself advice to a certain extent. So I don't know, that's a theory that definitely could be possible here, since both guys kind of experience the same things with their wives. Then we cut out in the woods with Julie and Ethan as we can see that she did return back to the ruins. So what ends up happening here is that Julie tells Ethan that when she was at the ruins yesterday with Randall, the screaming that she hears all the time stopped when they came there. But she tells Ethan how she's afraid to get closer and walk in to see what's going to happen. And Ethan tells her we can hold hands and we can walk in together. So they hold hands, walk in together, and some of the freakiest shit of the whole season ends up happening here. The same thing that happened to Boyd when he lit the torch when he was inside the ruins and he just traveled back in time is the same thing that happens to Julie when she just simply walks inside. Now it is sort of weird that Julie doesn't need anything the way Boyd did to be teleported into the chamber. Instead, she could just walk inside and that's what gets her there. Now you could argue that Ethan was the reason why Julie was able to travel back into the chamber, but then that wouldn't explain why Ethan isn't there. I'm thinking since she was already there being tortured when the cicada coma stuff happened, that connection sort of created like a wormhole for her to be able to travel back and forth. And this also might be true for Randall and Marielle as well. But as soon as she travels back inside, she seems to be back in hell and she can hear all the screams full blown at this point. And before we end up getting more information, we cut away. And real quick, I just want to go back and clarify about what I meant between Julie and Boyd Boyd's experiences with the chamber. So it does seem like Boyd was able to physically light the torch and actually travel back to the chamber area with Martin, where with Julie it seems more like an astro travel type of thing because her body is physically still there in current time, but her consciousness seems to be what's traveling through all of these different areas. So not exactly the same, because it seems like what Julie is able to do is way beyond what Boyd was able to do just by lighting the torch. But yeah, just for clarification. Then back over at Sarah's place in the basement with Victor and Tabitha, they're finally able to jog Victor's memory a little bit and get a little more information out of him. And we're able to find out that Victor remembers watching Christopher speak to Jasper over at the church. So now we know where they need to go to jog that memory a little bit more. Then for a brief second, we cut over to Colony House where Kenny and Officer Acosta is questioning the guy who found Tilly's body. And everything understandably comes back to Sarah, which they believe it was her since she's the only person that has killed someone who's still in the town. Then we cut over to the sheriff's station with Ellis and Boyd as they're still trying to figure out what the hell they need to do with Fatima. What needs to be the plan? And Boyd is still trying to get it through Ellis's thick skull that if they come clean with everybody, Fatima will more than likely end up dead. So Donna walks in during this time and she's like, what's going on? And Boyd just goes ahead and tells her the truth. And he's like, yeah, it was Fatima that killed Tilly. And of course, Donna just has that shocked as shit look on her face. Then we cut back to Kenny and Officer Acosta as they're leaving Colony House to go question Sarah. And while they're on their way, before they make it there, Ethan shows up and tells them how he needs help immediately to help Julie. Then we finally cut back to Julie where we basically get the most interesting scene from this episode. We find out that Julie was the one who threw the rope down to Boyd last season when he was trapped in the well. We all kept wondering how in the hell Old Man Martin was able to throw the rope down, and did he use his feet or what? There was so many theories surrounding how in the hell he was able to do this, and it comes to find out it was never him in the first place. Also, when she first shows up, Martin knows her name already. Pretty much like all the monsters there seem to already know everyone's names who are there. Except Martin's not a monster that we know of, but he already seems to know her name just like he already knew Boyd's name. All he tells Julie is that the person in the well needs her help and how she needs to throw the rope down. She listens and just does it. Of course she has more questions, but Martin tells her that she needs to leave before he gets back, whoever the hell he is. But she does end up walking out of the door in the chamber, but then after walking through the door, she ends up time traveling to the monster tunnels back in town. And this is where she can hear the dirty little white children chanting the Ankui word, and she can hear her mom Tabitha screaming, which is also a scene from last season that we remember. Now, while all of this is happening, Ethan finally gets back with Officer Acosta and Kenny, and they pick Julie up and they carry her out of the ruins where she just wakes up and comes to. Now, there's a few things I need to talk about here, and there's a little hint I'm going to give you guys for some stuff to come in later episodes. But certain things that always happen in the series that tend to bug me, people can argue with me down in the comments, I don't care. But when Officer Acosta and Kenny got there, they seemed to just know to pick Julie up and to carry her somewhere else outside of the ruins. Now, you could argue that they were picking her up to travel back to town with her, but if that was the case, they would have picked her up and traveled back in the direction they came instead of going in the other direction to get her out of the chamber. So yeah, I feel a little weird about that because you could say they were picking her up to try to take her back to town, although that wasn't really the right direction. Or you could say they were picking her up because they kind of knew that they needed to get her out of the chamber area. But like I said, that just seems a little bit weird that they just knew to do that, because it seems like they would have attempted to try to kind of wake her up where she was first. I don't really agree with that scene. I felt like it could have been done better, but that is my personal critique on that scene. Come at me down in the comments, please. But anyway, after that, I think we all can confirm now that Julie has confirmed that time travel is possible. She was able to go back in time and interact with Boyd during that time he was trapped in the well. Not only was she able to travel back to a different time, but she was also able to interact and change things during that point in time. So that was definitely pretty interesting, and it makes you start to ponder on a couple of things, like, is Marielle and Randall also capable of traveling between different times just like Julie is because of what happened with the cicada coma stuff? Also, is Boyd able to do the same thing and he just needs the torch, or was that just a one-time thing for him? And it also makes you think how many other unexplainable events in the show already could have been explained through someone who was able to travel through time and affect things at some different point in time, especially a person that we already know of. It just makes you think. Also, I'll give you guys an upcoming hint about what Julie possibly is. In a later episode, possibly the next episode, episode, Julie is told that she is what is called a story walker, which means that she can travel back through parts of the story that have already happened. That's all I'll give you guys right now. We'll expand upon it later. Then back over at the sheriff's station with Boyd, Ellis, and Donna, Donna basically tells Boyd that if you don't tell everybody that Fatima did it, I will. And then after she leaves, Ellis is like, what the hell are we gonna do? And Boyd's like, hey, pack some shit. Like, we don't care, it ain't happening. Donna also reveals how Boyd doesn't have as much pull as he used to in the town anymore, and how people just don't believe in him anymore like they used to, which isn't really a surprise. They've been going through a lot of devastating events, and of course they've lost faith in Boyd to some extent. Then after Victor, Tabitha, and Sarah get down in the church basement, we start getting very interesting information about the conversation between Jasper and Christopher. Victor starts telling them about how they said the answers for the end are at the beginning, how the children were born into the darkness, and how they were murdered. And then Victor starts telling them about how someone who loved the children told them a story, and how the story gave them hope, and how after the children laid on the stones, they poured their hope into the roots, and then how those roots became the tree. And also I forgot to mention that in this moment, Victor finds out that Jasper wasn't actually talking, and how he misremembered the story, and how actually Christopher was speaking to the boy in white. And the boy in white went on to tell Christopher how he needs to take the faraway tree, but he says Christopher wouldn't listen. So basically we got a lot more information to make our puzzle more of a puzzle. But I can tell you guys that this episode is hinting at a lot of information that will be further explained in the finale. Then ultimately we find out that since Christopher wouldn't go to the tree, Victor ended up telling his mom what the boy in white said, which is the reason why Miranda went to the tree. So of course at this point in time we can assume that Victor is going to feel more guilty because he's going to feel responsible for his mom's death for sending her to the faraway tree. Then the episode ends as we cut back to Elgin as he arrives out to the shed out in the woods where Fatima is being kept. After he arrives, we then cut to a scene where we see Boyd and Ellis on their way out to the shed, and then Fatima is gone. Then we cut back to Elgin and Fatima as we see them arriving at the cellar back outside of town, where Elgin takes her down in the cellar, and of course we already know that he's about to put her in that damn room. Fatima tries to walk away and leave, but she starts to feel the pain from the baby or whatever the hell is happening to her. And then Elgin grabs her and drags her ass back down into the cellar and presumably into that back room. And then the episode ends. So yeah, that was some pretty crazy shit, and apparently now Elgin is the new Sarah. He's working for the monsters in the town now, which I would assume that the Komodo lady is one of them to some extent. But it also brings forth the idea as to why in the hell do they want her to have the baby there? What's gonna happen there to where Fatima needs to be there to have the child? I mean, were those skeleton remains that we saw on the floor from someone who also assisted in helping the child? I mean, will those skeleton remains turn out to be Elgin's skeleton remains moving forward because he's gonna lock himself in that room with Fatima? I mean, where is this gonna go exactly? And plus Boyd and Ellis are now left out in the dark and they gotta figure out what in the hell happened to Fatima. But I'm thinking that now maybe this could possibly work in Boyd and Ellis's favor if they could find out that Elgin took Fatima and then blame it on Elgin, which means Elgin might end up being thrown in the box by the end of the season. There's definitely a lot of ways that this can unfold, plus the biggest thing with this episode, which is finding out that Julie is a story walker, meaning that she's able to travel through time and possibly affect things in different areas of time throughout the show, which means if she's already been able to jump back into the past, is it possible for her to jump into the future and affect future events? Or can she only affect things that have already happened, or can she affect things at all? I'm thinking the question of whether or not if Julie can affect things that have previously happened has already been answered in this episode when it was proven that she threw down the rope to help Boyd. So where is this going to go? Things are going to get very interesting, of course. Let me know you guys' thoughts down below, guys, and as always, thank you for watching.